For centuries, humanity looked to the skies and dreamed of flight. From ancient myths like Icarus, who flew too close to the sun, to the visionary sketches of Leonardo da Vinci's flying machines, the desire to soar like birds captured the imagination of generations. The ability to conquer the skies seemed out of reach for much of human history, limited to fantasies and failed experiments. Yet, by the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the dream of flight was beginning to seem possible. The Industrial Revolution had sparked a wave of technological advancements that changed the way people lived, traveled, and worked. Steam engines powered ships and trains, and new innovations in engineering were emerging daily. Inventors and engineers around the world began to turn their attention to the skies, seeking to create machines capable of controlled, powered flight. Among these inventors were two brothers from Dayton, Ohio, Orville and Wilbur Wright, who would eventually achieve what many had thought impossible. The Wright brothers were not the first to attempt flight, but they were the first to succeed. Unlike many of their contemporaries who focused on building powerful engines or gliders that looked like birds, the Wrights approached flight scientifically. They believed that the key to human flight was not just power, but control. Through years of experimentation, perseverance, and methodical testing, the Wright brothers would develop the world's first successful powered airplane, forever changing the course of history. Their invention, the Wright Flyer, made its first flight on December 17, 1903, at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. This moment marked the birth of the aviation age, an era that would redefine human transportation, communication, and warfare. The Wright brothers' journey from curious bicycle mechanics to aviation pioneers is a story of innovation, determination, and the relentless pursuit of a dream that had eluded humanity for centuries. Chapter 1. The Wright Brothers' Early Life and Curiosity. Orville Wright was born on August 19, 1871, and his brother Wilbur Wright on April 16, 1867, in a modest home in Dayton, Ohio. They were the sons of Milton Wright, a bishop in the Church of the United Brethren, and Susan Kerner Wright, a mechanically inclined woman who fostered a sense of curiosity in her children. From an early age, the Wright brothers were encouraged to explore and experiment, particularly when it came to mechanical objects. Their father, who often traveled for church work, would bring back toys and trinkets that sparked the boys' imaginations. One of the pivotal moments in their childhood came when their father brought home a toy helicopter made of bamboo and paper. Powered by a twisted rubber band, the toy flew in circles before gently descending to the ground. The brothers were fascinated by the simple flying machine, and they later credited this toy with igniting their early interest in flight. They spent hours playing with it, and when it broke, they built their own versions, trying to improve upon the original design. Though they both excelled in school, neither Orville nor Wilbur completed their formal education. Wilbur had initially planned to attend Yale University, but an accident left him bedridden for several years, which delayed his plans. Orville dropped out of high school to pursue a career in printing. Despite their lack of formal education, both brothers were voracious readers and taught themselves through books and hands-on experimentation. In 1889, the brothers launched their first entrepreneurial venture, a printing business. Orville, who had built his own printing press from spare parts, convinced Wilbur to join him in the enterprise. Together, they printed newspapers, books, and pamphlets for local businesses. The printing business provided them with mechanical skills and a deep understanding of how machines worked, a foundation that would later prove invaluable in their quest for flight. In the mid-1890s, the Wright brothers shifted their focus from printing to the booming bicycle industry. They opened a bicycle sales and repair shop in Dayton, which quickly became a success. The bicycle business not only provided them with financial stability, but also honed their mechanical abilities. They learned about balance, aerodynamics, and the importance of lightweight materials, concepts that would later apply to their aviation experiments. As their business grew, so did their interest in solving the problem of flight. They followed the work of aviation pioneers like Otto Lilienthal, a German engineer who had conducted numerous glider flights before tragically dying in a crash in 1896. Lilienthal's death, while tragic, convinced the Wright brothers that flight was possible with the right understanding of aerodynamics and control. In 1899, the Wright brothers decided to dedicate themselves to the pursuit of human flight. They believed that the key to success lay in controlling an aircraft once it was in the air, a concept that had eluded many of their contemporaries. With the skills they had developed from their bicycle business and their determination to succeed, Orville and Wilbur set out to make history. Chapter 2. The Wright brothers enter the race for flight. By the late 19th century, the race to achieve powered flight was intensifying. Inventors and engineers from around the world were experimenting with flying machines, hoping to be the first to conquer the skies. While many were focused on building larger engines or creating wings that mimicked bird flight, the Wright brothers took a different approach. They believed that control was the most critical aspect of flight, and they set out to understand how to manipulate an aircraft in the air. The Wright brothers meticulously studied the work of earlier aviation pioneers. They were particularly inspired by Otto Lilienthal, who had made significant advancements in understanding how wings generate lift. Lilienthal's research showed that curved wings were more effective than flat ones, and his glider flights provided valuable data on the principles of aerodynamics. However, Lilienthal's tragic death in 1896 after a crash underscored the dangers of flying without proper control. The Wrights also studied the experiments of Samuel Langley, an American astronomer and engineer who had achieved brief powered flights with unmanned models. Langley's aerodrome, a large manned aircraft, was considered one of the most advanced flying machines of its time. However, despite his extensive resources and government backing, Langley's attempts to launch the aerodrome into the air ended in failure, as it crashed into the Potomac River during a public demonstration in 1903. Unlike Langley and other contemporaries, the Wright brothers focused not just on getting a plane into the air, but on keeping it there in a controlled manner. They believed that mastering three-axis control, yaw, left and right, pitch, up and down, and roll, banking, was the key to sustained flight. Their goal was to design a system that allowed the pilot to control all three aspects of movement simultaneously, something no other inventor had yet achieved. In 1899, Wilbur wrote to the Smithsonian Institution, requesting any available information on the science of flight. The Smithsonian provided him with papers on aerodynamics, which fueled the brothers' passion. Soon after, they began conducting their own experiments with kites and gliders, testing different wing shapes and control mechanisms. One of their key innovations during this period was the development of wing warping, a technique that allowed the pilot to twist the wings to control the aircraft's roll. The Wright brothers were methodical in their approach, conducting hundreds of experiments to gather data on lift, drag, and control. They built a wind tunnel in their bicycle shop, where they tested over 200 wing designs. This allowed them to make precise calculations about how air moved over different surfaces, giving them a better understanding of aerodynamics than anyone else at the time. Armed with this knowledge, the brothers began designing a full-size glider that they hoped would be the precursor to a powered airplane. They chose Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, as their testing ground due to its steady winds, soft sand, and open space. In 1900, they arrived in Kitty Hawk with their first glider, eager to test their theories in real-world conditions. Chapter 3. The First Glider Experiments at Kitty Hawk. In 1900, Orville and Wilbur Wright made their first journey to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, a remote and windswept stretch of the Outer Banks. Kitty Hawk had been carefully selected after a series of letters exchanged with local weather officials, who informed the brothers that the location's strong winds and soft, sandy dunes would be ideal for flight tests. The isolation of Kitty Hawk also ensured that the brothers could work in privacy, away from the prying eyes of competitors and curious onlookers. Their first glider, built primarily of spruce wood and muslin fabric, was an ambitious but rudimentary design. It had a wingspan of 17 feet and featured their innovative wing warping system, which allowed them to control the roll of the glider by twisting the wings. The glider also had a forward elevator or horizontal stabilizer, which the brothers used to control pitch, the up and down motion. However, the initial tests were disappointing. The glider did not generate as much lift as they had expected, and the brothers struggled to stay airborne for more than a few seconds. Despite these setbacks, the Wrights remained undeterred. They collected data from each flight, noting how different factors such as wind speed, wing angle, and weight distribution affected the glider's performance. Over the next 2 years, the brothers made several trips to Kitty Hawk, each time bringing a new, improved glider based on the data they had gathered. By 1902, they had developed a larger glider with a 32-foot wingspan and more refined control mechanisms. This glider marked a significant breakthrough in their research, as they were able to achieve sustained, controlled flights of over 600 feet. During this time, the Wrights also introduced a third control surface, the rudder, which allowed them to control yaw, the side-to-side motion of the aircraft. With this innovation, the brothers had developed a fully functional system for controlling all 3 axes of movement: pitch, roll, and yaw. This system of 3-axis control would become the foundation of modern aircraft design, and it was a major reason for the Wrights' success where others had failed. The 1902 glider was a major step forward, but the brothers knew that powered flight was the ultimate goal. They had proven that they could control an aircraft in the air, but now they needed to build a machine that could generate its own power and sustain flight over longer distances. The next challenge was to develop a lightweight engine capable of propelling their aircraft into the sky. Chapter 4. Building the First Powered Airplane. By 1902, the Wright brothers had achieved significant breakthroughs in glider flight, mastering the principles of 3-axis control with their 1902 glider. Now, they were ready to take the next step, creating a powered aircraft. This was no small challenge. At the time, engines were either too heavy or too weak to lift a manned aircraft into the air. Many inventors had tried and failed, unable to balance the need for power with the need for lightness. The Wright brothers, however, approached the problem with the same methodical precision they had applied to their earlier experiments. The first step in building a powered airplane was designing the engine. While there were some lightweight engines available, none met the Wrights' requirements for power and efficiency. The brothers turned to their trusted mechanic, Charles Taylor, who worked at their bicycle shop in Dayton. Taylor had a background in machine work, and with his help, they designed and built an engine specifically for their aircraft. The engine was a four-cylinder, water-cooled gasoline engine made from aluminum to reduce its weight. It produced 12 horsepower and weighed only 180 pounds, a remarkable achievement for the time. This engine was powerful enough to lift the aircraft into the air while being light enough not to overload the fragile structure of the plane. The brothers also designed propellers, using their wind tunnel data to create highly efficient blades that would convert the engine's power into forward thrust. Remarkably, they calculated that their propeller efficiency would be around 66%, an incredibly high figure even by modern standards. With the engine and propellers ready, the brothers began building the Wright Flyer, which would become the world's first successful powered airplane. The Flyer had a wingspan of 40 feet and weighed 605 pounds. Its biplane design, with two stacked wings, provided the necessary lift, while the rudder and wing warping system allowed the pilot to maintain control. The brothers retained the forward elevator, which controlled pitch, ensuring the plane could be raised and lowered during flight. In the fall of 1903, the Wright brothers returned to Kitty Hawk with their newly constructed Flyer. The remote location, with its strong winds and open space, was once again an ideal testing ground. After months of preparation and assembly, they were finally ready to attempt powered flight. The weather at Kitty Hawk in December 1903 was cold and windy, but the brothers were determined. On December 14th, Wilbur won a coin toss and attempted the first flight. Unfortunately, the plane stalled upon takeoff and crashed into the sand, causing minor damage. Undeterred, the brothers repaired the Flyer and prepared for another attempt a few days later. Chapter 5. The First Powered Flight, December 17, 1903. On the morning of December 17, 1903, the Wright brothers stood on the dunes of Kitty Hawk, ready to make history. The wind was blowing at 27 miles per hour, providing enough lift for the aircraft to get off the ground. With the Flyer repaired and the conditions right, the brothers were eager to try again. This time, Orville would take the controls. At 10:35 a.m., Orville Wright lay on his stomach in the Flyer's cockpit, his hands gripping the controls. The Flyer was positioned on a launch rail, a 60-foot wooden track that would help guide the aircraft into the air. As the engine roared to life and the propellers spun, Orville released the restraining wire, and the Flyer began to move forward. The aircraft lifted off the ground, wobbling slightly in the wind but gaining altitude. For 12 seconds, Orville piloted the Flyer through the air, covering a distance of 120 feet before the plane touched down in the soft sand. It wasn't a long flight, but it was a monumental one. For the first time in history, a heavier-than-air machine had flown under its own power with a pilot on board. The brothers were ecstatic, but they weren't finished. Over the next few hours, they made 3 more flights, with each brother taking turns at the controls. The longest flight of the day, piloted by Wilbur, lasted 59 seconds and covered 852 feet. This flight proved that their design was not only capable of brief hops, but sustained, controlled flight over a significant distance. The news of their achievement did not immediately make waves. The brothers, ever cautious and secretive, were concerned about protecting their invention from competitors. They didn't invite journalists to witness the event, and only a handful of people, mostly local fishermen and lifeguards, were there to see history in the making. Nonetheless, the first powered flight on December 17, 1903, marked the beginning of a new era in human transportation. While the first flight may have been short, it was the culmination of years of experimentation and the start of an entirely new field of technology. The brothers packed up their flyer and returned to Dayton, knowing that they had achieved something remarkable. The next step would be refining their design and proving to the world that controlled, powered flight was no longer a dream, but a reality. Chapter 6. Proving and Improving Their Invention. After their success at Kitty Hawk, the Wright brothers returned to Dayton with a sense of accomplishment, but also an understanding that there was much more work to be done. While the flights in Kitty Hawk had demonstrated that powered flight was possible, the distances were still short, and the control systems needed improvement. Over the next several years, the Wrights focused on refining their design and perfecting their flying techniques. Back in Dayton, they rebuilt the Wright Flyer and set up a new testing field at Huffman Prairie, just outside the city. Huffman Prairie was not as windy as Kitty Hawk, which made flying more challenging, but the brothers were determined to make their flights longer and more controlled. They experimented with their 3-axis control system, tweaking the rudder and wing warping mechanisms to improve stability in the air. In 1904 and 1905, the Wright brothers made significant progress. Their flights became longer and more controlled, with distances reaching over 24 miles. They achieved full circuits around the field and began flying for extended periods, demonstrating that their aircraft was capable of sustained, controlled flight over considerable distances. By 1905, the Wright brothers had built the Wright Flyer 3rd, a more advanced version of their earlier designs. This plane could stay in the air for up to 39 minutes and cover distances of 24 miles in a single flight. The brothers had solved the major problems of flight, including takeoff, landing, and mid-air control. With their 3-axis control system fully functional, the Wrights had developed the world's first practical airplane. Despite their success, the Wright brothers were still cautious about revealing too much of their technology to the public. They were concerned that competitors would steal their ideas, and they spent much of this period securing patents for their inventions. In 1906, they were awarded a patent for their 3-axis control system, giving them legal protection against imitators. While the Wright brothers had proven to themselves that flight was possible, they still needed to convince the world. The next step in their journey was to demonstrate their aircraft to the public and attract potential buyers for their invention. But first, they needed to overcome skepticism and competition from other aviation pioneers. Chapter 7. Public Demonstrations and International Fame. By 1906, the Wright brothers had achieved what many thought was impossible. They had created a powered airplane capable of sustained, controlled flight. However, despite their success, they were still relatively unknown outside of a small circle of aviation enthusiasts. The brothers were cautious about making public demonstrations, fearing that their ideas would be stolen by competitors. Instead, they focused on securing patents and refining their aircraft in secret. But by 1908, they knew it was time to show the world what they had accomplished. The brothers recognized that in order to sell their invention and attract buyers, they needed to prove its capabilities through public demonstrations. They aimed to secure military contracts, both in the United States and abroad, believing that governments would see the potential of the airplane as a tool for reconnaissance and warfare. At the time, aviation was still in its infancy, and many military officials were skeptical of the airplane's practical applications. The Wrights' first major public demonstration took place in Le Mans, France, in August 1908. Wilbur traveled to France, where he had arranged to demonstrate the Wright Flyer to the Aero Club de France and other influential figures. The French were especially eager to see the American brothers' airplane in action, as several European inventors had been working on their own flying machines, but had yet to achieve the success that the Wrights had. When Wilbur made his first flight in France, it was nothing short of spectacular. The audience, which included some of the most prominent aviators and engineers of the time, watched in awe as Wilbur piloted the Wright Flyer with remarkable control and precision. He performed graceful turns, flew in circles, and demonstrated the aircraft's stability and maneuverability. The French press quickly hailed the Wright brothers as the true pioneers of flight, and Wilbur became an international celebrity almost overnight. The successful demonstrations in France opened the door to opportunities across Europe. Wilbur continued to fly in France, breaking records for both altitude and distance. He even carried passengers, showing that the Wright Flyer was capable of flying with more than just a single pilot on board. His performances silenced skeptics and convinced many that the airplane was not just a novelty, but a practical invention with far-reaching potential. While Wilbur was in France, Orville was conducting his own demonstrations in the United States. In September 1908, Orville demonstrated the Wright Flyer at Fort Myer, Virginia, in front of military officials from the U.S. Army. The Army was interested in purchasing airplanes for reconnaissance and other military purposes, and Orville's flights were meant to show that the Wright Flyer met their requirements. Orville's demonstrations in the U.S. were also impressive, with the aircraft performing controlled flights over the military base. However, the success was marred by tragedy. On September 17, 1908, during a flight with Lieutenant Thomas Selfridge as a passenger, the airplane crashed due to a mechanical failure. Selfridge was killed in the accident, becoming the first person to die in an airplane crash, and Orville was seriously injured. Despite the accident, the U.S. Army remained interested in the Wright brothers' invention, and Orville recovered from his injuries to continue demonstrating the aircraft. By 1909, the Wright brothers had secured their place as the leading pioneers of aviation. They were awarded contracts by both the U.S. Army and the French government to supply airplanes for military use. Their aircraft were recognized for their reliability, ease of control, and ability to fly longer distances than any other aircraft at the time. The Wrights had not only invented the airplane, they had also proven its practical value in both civilian and military applications. The brothers' fame spread quickly, and they became international celebrities. They were invited to give demonstrations across Europe, including in Italy, where they flew over Rome and impressed King Victor Emmanuel III. Wilbur and Orville were celebrated as the inventors who had made flight a reality, and their success inspired a new generation of aviators to push the boundaries of what airplanes could achieve. Despite their growing fame, the Wright brothers remained humble and focused on their work. They continued to improve their aircraft and develop new models, including the Wright Model A, which was more advanced and capable of flying longer distances with greater stability. Their public demonstrations had solidified their reputation as the leading figures in aviation, but they also knew that competition was growing. As more inventors and engineers entered the field of aviation, the Wright brothers would soon face challenges, not only from their competitors but also in the courtroom, as legal battles over patents and recognition threatened to overshadow their achievements. Chapter 8. The Wrights versus Competitors. The Fight for Recognition. As the Wright brothers continued to develop their aircraft and demonstrate their achievements, other inventors and aviators were racing to make their own mark on the field of aviation. One of the most prominent competitors was Glenn Curtiss, an American inventor and aviation pioneer who had developed his own aircraft with significant success. Curtiss, like the Wrights, was determined to push the boundaries of flight and establish himself as a leader in the emerging aviation industry. The rivalry between the Wright brothers and Curtiss was not just about technological advancement. It also became a legal battle over patents and recognition. In 1906, the Wright brothers had been awarded a patent for their three-axis control system, which allowed them to control an aircraft's yaw, pitch, and roll. This system was the foundation of modern aircraft design, and the brothers believed that anyone who used similar control mechanisms was infringing on their patent. Curtiss, however, had developed his own aircraft, the Curtiss Flyer, which used a different control system involving ailerons, small wing flaps, instead of wing warping. The Wright brothers argued that Curtiss's system still violated their patent, and they took him to court in what became one of the most famous patent disputes in aviation history. The legal battle between the Wrights and Curtiss dragged on for years, with both sides claiming victory at various points. The Wright brothers won several court rulings that upheld their patent, but Curtiss continued to challenge their claims. The legal dispute consumed much of the Wrights' time and resources, preventing them from focusing fully on developing new aircraft models. In the meantime, other aviation pioneers in Europe, such as Louis Blériot, were making significant advancements in flight technology. The Wright brothers' legal struggles also extended beyond Curtiss. They fought similar patent battles in Europe, where aviation was rapidly gaining popularity. In France, the brothers faced competition from inventors like Alberto Santos Dumont, who had made his own pioneering flights. The Wrights believed that their patent should apply globally, but enforcing their intellectual property rights across different countries proved difficult. Despite the challenges, the Wright brothers remained committed to protecting their invention. They understood that their three-axis control system was a critical breakthrough in aviation, and they wanted to ensure that they received the recognition and compensation they deserved. However, the patent battles also damaged their reputation in some circles, as other aviators accused the brothers of stifling innovation by monopolizing key aspects of flight control. In 1914, after years of legal wrangling, the U.S. courts ruled in favor of the Wright brothers, declaring that Curtiss had indeed infringed on their patent. While this was a major victory for the Wrights, the court case had come at a cost. By the time the ruling was issued, the aviation industry had moved forward, and new technologies were emerging that rendered some of the Wrights' innovations less critical. The legal battle between the Wrights and Curtiss was a reminder of the complexities of innovation. While the Wright brothers had been the first to achieve powered flight and develop a reliable control system, the field of aviation was growing rapidly, and other inventors were building upon the foundation they had laid. The rivalry between the Wrights and their competitors ultimately pushed aviation technology forward, but it also highlighted the challenges that come with being pioneers in a new field. Chapter 9. The Birth of the Aviation Industry. As the Wright brothers' legal battles over patents came to an end, the aviation industry was beginning to take shape. The early 20th century saw a growing number of inventors, engineers, and entrepreneurs entering the field, eager to build on the foundation laid by the Wright brothers. the world was becoming increasingly aware of the potential that powered flight held, not just for transportation, but for commerce, warfare, and global communication. The Wright brothers, despite their legal disputes, were at the forefront of this transformation. They had already secured contracts with the U.S. Army and several foreign governments to produce airplanes for military use. These contracts marked the beginning of the aviation industry, as governments and private companies began to invest in the development of aircraft for a variety of purposes. In 1909, the Wright Company was officially established, with Wilbur and Orville serving as its leaders. The company was focused on the production of aircraft for both military and civilian purposes, and it quickly became one of the most prominent players in the fledgling aviation industry. The Wright brothers also opened one of the first flight schools at Sims Station near Dayton, where they trained a new generation of pilots. Many of these pilots went on to become key figures in the development of aviation in the U.S. and abroad. One of the most significant early contracts for the Wright Company came from the U.S. Army Signal Corps, which purchased a Wright Flyer in 1909. This was the first military aircraft ever sold, and it marked the beginning of the use of airplanes in warfare. The military recognized the potential of the airplane for reconnaissance, and the Wright brothers' aircraft were soon being used for observation and communication during military exercises. At the same time, aviation was starting to capture the public imagination in ways that went beyond military applications. Air shows and demonstrations drew huge crowds, eager to witness the marvel of human flight. In 1909, the Grande Semaine d'Aviation in Reims, France, became one of the first major aviation events, attracting some of the best pilots and aircraft from around the world. Wilbur Wright's earlier demonstrations in France had already captured the nation's attention, and this event further cemented aviation's place in popular culture. The growing interest in aviation also attracted entrepreneurs and investors who saw the potential for airplanes to revolutionize travel and commerce. Companies began to form around the production of aircraft, and by the 1910s, the first commercial aviation ventures were taking flight. Early airplanes were used to deliver mail, carry passengers over short distances, and transport goods across regions that were difficult to reach by train or car. The Wright brothers were also involved in some of these early commercial ventures, though they were primarily focused on improving their aircraft and securing military contracts. However, they could see that the future of aviation extended beyond military use. The dream of commercial air travel was beginning to take hold, even if the technology was not yet advanced enough to support long-distance passenger flights. The rise of aviation was not without its challenges. The airplanes of the early 20th century were still relatively fragile and unreliable, prone to crashes and mechanical failures. The industry lacked the infrastructure that would later make air travel safer and more efficient, such as airports, runways, and air traffic control systems. But despite these obstacles, the progress made in just a few short years was remarkable. The First World War, 1914-1918, played a pivotal role in accelerating the development of aviation. When war broke out in Europe, airplanes were initially used for reconnaissance missions, flying over enemy lines to gather intelligence. However, it didn't take long for military strategists to realize that airplanes could be used for more than just observation. Soon, fighter planes and bombers were developed, and aerial combat became a crucial element of the war. The Wright brothers, who had once dreamed of peaceful uses for their invention, now saw their airplanes transformed into instruments of war. While the Wright Company produced aircraft for the U.S. military, The war also spurred rapid advancements in aviation technology, as governments invested heavily in developing faster, more powerful, and more reliable aircraft. By the end of World War I, aviation had evolved far beyond what the Wright brothers had initially envisioned. Despite the increasing militarization of aviation, the post-war period saw renewed interest in the potential of airplanes for civilian and commercial purposes. The first airmail routes were established, connecting major cities by air and speeding up communication across the country. In the 1920s, Charles Lindbergh's solo flight across the Atlantic in 1927 captivated the world and demonstrated that long-distance air travel was not only possible but also feasible for future development. The Wright brothers' pioneering work had laid the foundation for the aviation industry, but by the 1920s and 1930s, new inventors and companies were leading the way in transforming airplanes into everyday tools for transportation and commerce. Companies like Boeing, Curtiss-Wright, and Douglas Aircraft began producing larger, more advanced planes, and airlines started to form to carry passengers and cargo across the country and eventually across the world. Although the aviation industry had grown beyond their direct involvement, the legacy of the Wright brothers was firmly established. Their methodical approach to solving the problems of flight, their innovations in control systems, and their determination to bring flight to the world had set in motion a technological revolution that would continue to shape the 20th century and beyond. Chapter 10: Wilbur's Death and Orville's Later Life. As the aviation industry blossomed, the Wright brothers, who had started it all, began to face personal and professional challenges. Though they had achieved worldwide fame and cemented their legacy as pioneers of flight, their journey was marked by struggles, both legal and health-related. For Wilbur and Orville, their greatest achievements in aviation came early, and the later years of their lives would be shaped by maintaining their legacy while watching the industry they had founded evolve without them. In 1912, tragedy struck the Wright family. Wilbur Wright, the elder of the two brothers, contracted typhoid fever, a common and often deadly illness at the time. Wilbur had always been the driving force behind the brothers' technical achievements, with a sharp mind and relentless dedication to solving the challenges of flight. However, his health deteriorated rapidly, and on May 30, 1912, at the age of 45, Wilbur passed away. Wilbur's death was a profound loss for Orville, who had always worked in close partnership with his brother. The two had been inseparable, with a bond that was both personal and professional. Wilbur's death left a void in Orville's life and the business they had built together. Many historians believe that the Wright brothers' collective genius was greater than the sum of its parts, and without Wilbur, Orville was left to carry on their legacy alone. Despite his grief, Orville continued to oversee the Wright Company, but his heart was no longer fully in the work. Without Wilbur's guidance and partnership, Orville found the business side of aviation less fulfilling. In 1915, just 3 years after Wilbur's death, Orville made the decision to sell the Wright Company. The company had been involved in manufacturing airplanes for the U.S. military and other clients, but Orville was never as interested in the commercial side of aviation as he had been in the technical challenges of flight. He sold the company to a group of New York investors, ending the Wright brothers' direct involvement in the aviation industry. After selling the company, Orville largely stepped back from active participation in aviation, though he continued to work on various inventions and serve as a consultant on aviation-related matters. He returned to his hometown of Dayton, Ohio, where he lived a quieter life, spending time in his laboratory and continuing to experiment with mechanical devices. Although Orville was no longer directly involved in the aviation industry, he remained a respected figure in the field and served as a mentor to younger generations of aviators and engineers. Orville's later life was marked by a mix of satisfaction and frustration. On the one hand, he lived to see the incredible advancements that had been made in aviation, from the first transatlantic flights to the development of commercial airliners that could carry passengers across the country and the world. He was honored by governments, universities, and scientific organizations for his contributions to aviation, and his role as a pioneer was never in doubt. However, Orville also faced ongoing frustration over how the Wright brothers' legacy was perceived. The legal battles over patents, particularly the long-running dispute with Glenn Curtiss, had taken a toll on Orville, and he often felt that the Wright brothers' contributions to aviation were being overshadowed by newer figures in the field. In particular, Orville was troubled by how some aviation historians credited other inventors with pioneering advances that he and Wilbur had developed years earlier. Despite these frustrations, Orville remained proud of what he and Wilbur had accomplished. In 1928, Orville helped organize the restoration of the original Wright Flyer, which had been stored away for many years after its historic flight in 1903. The Flyer was placed in the Smithsonian Institution, where it remains on display to this day, recognized as one of the most important artifacts in the history of human innovation. This recognition was deeply meaningful to Orville, as it ensured that future generations would understand the pivotal role the Wright brothers played in the development of aviation. As aviation technology advanced, Orville lived to witness milestones that would have seemed unimaginable when he and Wilbur first flew at Kitty Hawk. He saw the introduction of jet engines, which made airplanes faster and more efficient, and the development of military aircraft that played crucial roles in World War II. Orville even lived to see the dawn of space exploration, as rocketry and satellite launches began to open up the possibility of traveling beyond the Earth's atmosphere. In 1944, Orville was invited to witness the first flight of a Lockheed Constellation, a large commercial airliner that represented the cutting edge of aviation technology at the time. He was struck by how far aviation had come since that first flight in 1903. The Constellation was capable of flying across the United States in just a few hours, something that would have been inconceivable when the Wright brothers first took to the skies. Orville marveled at the advancements but remained humble about his own contributions, often remarking that he and Wilbur had simply laid the foundation for what others had built upon. Orville Wright passed away on January 30th, 1948, at the age of 76. His death marked the end of an era, but his legacy, along with Wilbur's, had already been cemented in history. The Wright brothers are remembered not just as the inventors of the airplane, but as pioneers whose methodical approach to solving the problem of flight changed the course of human history. The story of Orville and Wilbur Wright is one of vision, perseverance, and innovation. Their partnership and complementary skills allowed them to achieve what no one else had before: the first successful powered flight. Though Wilbur's life was cut short, and Orville lived to see aviation evolve far beyond their early experiments, their legacy endures in every airplane that takes to the skies today. Chapter 11. The Legacy of the Wright Brothers. The legacy of Orville and Wilbur Wright is one of the most enduring in the history of innovation. Their pioneering efforts in aviation didn't just solve the problem of powered flight, they laid the foundation for an entirely new era of transportation, commerce, and communication. Today, the names of the Wright brothers are synonymous with the birth of aviation, and their contributions have been recognized and celebrated around the world. The Wright brothers' story is remarkable, not only because they achieved the first controlled powered flight, but also because of how they did it. Unlike many other inventors of their time, the Wrights approached the challenge of flight with a scientific mindset. They relied on rigorous experimentation, data collection, and testing to refine their designs, which set them apart from others who relied more on intuition or trial and error. Their creation of a wind tunnel to test wing shapes and their development of the three-axis control system were groundbreaking achievements that made controlled flight possible. The Wright Flyer, the aircraft that flew at Kitty Hawk in 1903, has become one of the most iconic inventions in history. Its design may appear simple by today's standards, but it represented a monumental leap forward in human capability. The Flyer is now housed in the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., where millions of visitors each year come to see the machine that started it all. The Wright brothers' contribution is displayed alongside other pivotal moments in aviation history, such as Charles Lindbergh's Spirit of St. Louis and the Apollo 11 command module. One of the most significant aspects of the Wright brothers' legacy is the way they changed how humanity thought about transportation. Before the Wright Flyer, the idea of traveling through the air was something reserved for science fiction and fantasy. The success of the Wrights demonstrated that powered flight was not only possible, but practical, sparking a global aviation industry that continues to grow to this day. Airplanes have since revolutionized travel, shrinking the world by connecting distant places in a matter of hours rather than days or weeks. The Wright brothers' influence also extends to the development of military aviation. Though their initial intent was peaceful, their invention quickly became a crucial tool in warfare. From World War I to the present day, airplanes have played pivotal roles in reconnaissance, air combat, and strategic bombing. The Wright brothers sold their aircraft to the U.S. Army, marking the first use of planes in military operations, and their innovations in control and stability laid the groundwork for modern fighter jets, bombers, and unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. In the civilian realm, the Wright brothers are often credited with giving birth to commercial aviation. While they were not directly involved in the development of passenger airlines, the principles they pioneered made it possible for others to build on their work and create a thriving industry. Today, airlines transport millions of people around the world every day, making global travel and commerce possible on an unprecedented scale. The concept of airmail, which began shortly after the Wright brothers' first flights, evolved into the vast network of international cargo and passenger flights that drive the global economy. Beyond their technical contributions, the Wright brothers also left a lasting mark on the spirit of innovation. Their story is one of perseverance, curiosity, and relentless problem-solving. The brothers faced numerous challenges, from financial difficulties to skepticism from the scientific community, but they never gave up on their vision. Their methodical approach to solving the problems of flight became a model for future inventors and engineers in other fields. Today, the Wright brothers are celebrated not just as pioneers of aviation, but as exemplars of the power of creativity, hard work, and determination. The Wright brothers' achievements have also inspired a long tradition of aviation pioneers who followed in their footsteps. From Amelia Earhart's solo flight across the Atlantic to the jet age and the eventual exploration of space, the spirit of innovation that began with the Wright Flyer continues to push the boundaries of human exploration. In many ways, the Wright brothers paved the way for the space race and the modern era of aerospace technology. Without their breakthroughs, it is unlikely that humans would have been able to develop the rockets, satellites, and space exploration systems that define the 21st century. The Wright brothers have been honored in many ways throughout the world. Numerous statues, museums, and airfields are dedicated to their memory. Dayton, Ohio, their hometown, has become a hub of aviation history, with the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force showcasing their achievements alongside the evolution of military aircraft. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, named in their honor, serves as a testament to the ongoing influence of their work. In 2003, the world celebrated the centennial of powered flight, marking 100 years since the Wright brothers' first successful flight at Kitty Hawk. The anniversary was marked by celebrations and commemorations around the globe, highlighting the profound impact the brothers' work has had on the world. The Wright brothers' legacy has not only endured, but has grown in importance as aviation continues to shape the modern world. Orville and Wilbur Wright's invention of the airplane was one of the defining moments of the 20th century, and their legacy continues to resonate in the 21st century. Their story serves as a reminder of what can be achieved through ingenuity, perseverance, and a commitment to turning dreams into reality. Every time an airplane takes off, whether it's a military jet, a commercial airliner, or a private plane, it carries with it the legacy of two brothers from Ohio who dared to dream of flight. The story of the Wright brothers is not just the tale of two men who invented the airplane. It is a testament to the power of human ingenuity, perseverance, and the belief that the impossible can be achieved. From their humble beginnings as bicycle mechanics in Dayton, Ohio, to the windswept dunes of Kitty Hawk, and eventually to the skies above cities across the world, Orville and Wilbur Wright changed the course of history with their groundbreaking achievements in aviation. Their success was not the result of luck or fortune, but of years of dedicated work, tireless experimentation, and an unwavering belief in their vision. They approached the problem of flight in a methodical and scientific manner, solving one challenge at a time. It was their meticulous attention to detail and their innovative thinking that allowed them to achieve what so many before them had only dreamed of: sustained, controlled, powered flight. The Wright brothers' impact on the world cannot be overstated. They laid the foundation for an industry that now connects people across the globe, supports commerce, and continues to push the boundaries of exploration. The invention of the airplane transformed warfare, revolutionized travel, and opened the door to the space age. From the early days of a 12-second flight at Kitty Hawk to the advanced jetliners and spacecraft of today, the influence of the Wright brothers is felt every time a human-made object takes to the air. As we look to the future, the spirit of innovation that the Wright brothers embodied continues to inspire. The challenges we face today, in transportation, communication, and beyond, are just as daunting as the quest for flight once was. But the legacy of Orville and Wilbur Wright reminds us that with creativity, perseverance, and a willingness to push the boundaries of what is possible, we can continue to overcome those challenges and shape the future. The Wright brothers may no longer be with us, but their contributions will endure as long as humanity takes to the skies and seeks new frontiers. Every flight, every new aviation technology, and every leap into the unknown is a tribute to the pioneering spirit of two brothers who believed that, with hard work and determination, even the sky was no limit.